Welcome to A Learner's Journey. My name is Molly Sanders, and the goal of this podcast is to inspire and motivate you by connecting you with a variety of passionate horsewomen and men who have dedicated their lives to helping horses and their people. I'm grateful you're here. In this episode, I'm excited to share with you a special conversation I recently had with a woman named Michelle Scully. Michelle is a passionate horsewoman whose life was forever changed years ago due to a tragic accident. She wrote a book about her experiences and the things that she learned along the way, and it is such an inspiring read, whether you have had an accident yourself or you just have been living life. It's a wonderful read. And I get a chance to talk to her about the book, about the accident, and a whole lot more. So I hope you enjoy the interview. Hi, Michelle. Welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited that you've joined us. And I wanted to start by telling the story of how we met, because this is the first time we've ever talked face to face. We met virtually through a clinic that just happened with Charlie Snell. And you joined in on the clinic, and then, we interacted via email, and so I felt like I kind of got to know you through that. And then the clinic ended and you reached out to me. I think it was a couple days later after the clinic was over, and you'd said that you had listened to an interview that I'd done with Charlie, where I shared with him how grateful I was for breaking my back because it's what caused me to meet him.
Right.
And you reached out and were like, I had no idea you broke your back. And in your email, you shared that you had as well. And then you said something to the effect of, you wrote a book about it. But you know how sometimes people make that a joke, like, oh, I've written the book on that, kind of thing. I kind of thought that's what you were saying. And then I went, wait a minute, I think she may have really written a book. So I asked you, did you really write a book? You said yes. I ordered it and read it in like 2 days. And I was like, I've got to have a conversation with you. So here we are.
It's funny how the circles that bring us together. And we're in a club together, Molly.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. One that we really didn't ever want to be in, but it is funny how that happens, how you meet people and people come into your life with certain lessons or things you needed to hear. And so I'm really glad that you did, and that I read your book, and that now you're willing to talk with me a little bit more about it.
I'm excited. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So I love hearing, people's stories and how they got started. So how did horses come into your life? How did you get started with horses?
It's funny that you asked that, because my husband and I just made a really fast trip over the weekend to move our son's stuff down to Southern California. And my husband's like a road warrior, where he just drives and doesn't talk. And he's trapped in the truck with me. And so I'm, like blah, blah, blah. And I was telling him, I'm like animal crazy. Just if I didn't have him like putting the brakes on things, I would be like a crazy dog horse rescue person, probably have like a little herd of goats and maybe a possum, who knows. But and I said to him, it's so weird, because my mom's not particularly animal oriented. I mean, when I was little, I had a rabbit, a chicken, this is all at the same time, a snapping turtle. I'm like, what adult thought that was a good idea? I don't know. Right. A chameleon, a hamster, a couple of chickens, rabbit. I mean, it was crazy.
Right.
But horses and dogs have always been like my soul animals. And so I don't know. And I was thinking, do you come out into the world that way? I don't know. But somehow when I was 5, my dad had horses when I was little, but like before I was cognizant of that. And then he died when I was 8.5. But somehow when I was 5, my parents let me get a horse, and it was this old, I wrote about her, Pepper, in my book, this old throwaway horse that I'm sure somebody was grateful to find a home for her.
Right.
A swayback, a strawberry roan. She was probably 800 years old. And I loved that horse, just loved it. It still just chokes me up. And if you love horses, all you have to say is, why do you love horses? And put a nickel in and you go nuts and you smell the smell and you feel the velvet of the nose. And I loved that horse. And then my dream, after my dad died, my mom sent me to camp for a few years. And I wanted to go to a horse camp, and I never ended up at a horse camp. But somehow, I just had friends who had horses, and we lived out in the country. So we'd go to brandings and things. And so I would like sneak touching the horses. And I think I took a few lessons here or there. But when I was in high school, my mom had remarried and we moved to Southern California, then moved back to my hometown, which is rural. And I was able to get a horse again, which I was woefully unequipped for, who she was and where she was, and had lots of adventures on her. She's also a black mare, and like my horse I have now. And then when I was at school at Davis, I went in as an animal science major and started taking horse internships. And then they had a equestrian center and a polo club and things like that. But it was when we had moved here where we live now in Lake County, and my sons were just little bitty. And when I'd been in college, I roped with friends who let me like exercise their horses and things. And then they were going to retire one of their rope horses and said, do you want to buy them? So that's when I, as like a grown up married person with kids, got back into horses.
Right. That's so great. It's so interesting to me. Everyone that I've talked to so far on this podcast, I've asked that question, and many of us have very similar stories. Definitely everyone has that like animal crazy, horse crazy from birth, like, and often we're the only ones in our families that have that.
Yeah, that's so weird.
Yeah, I know it is. I think it would be really interesting. Maybe someone's done a study on it to find out if there's some gene in there.
Like nature versus nurture. I think that all the time. I really do.
Yeah. Because there are people that have grown up, you said your dad had horses when you were little, but people that were born and raised on ranches and were around horses, they're still the ones that are horse crazy, and the ones that appreciate them and love them and are fairly good at what they're doing, but they don't ever get that bug that's like, they are a part of my being, like I have to be around them.
Yeah.
So I find that fascinating.
It is. It really is fascinating.
Yeah. And then, you had lots of experiences as a young kid with Pepper, and then this mare that you got when you were in high school, you at a pretty early age, or it doesn't take long of having a horse to realize it's probably not the safest thing to do on the planet.
Yeah.
And, you may get a foot stepped on, or, you come off, or here and there. And, as kids, it's easy to just,
no big deal.
Yeah. I had so many different things happen that could have been really bad and would have shaken me more now, that I'm older.
For sure.
But, when injuries happen, and most people, again, that have been around horses for a while have had some injury in some form or another, or some scare. It changes things, right? Yeah. And your book, which I have right here, and I love the title of it. So I'll hold it up.
Thank you.
Broken Tales of Tales of a Titanium Cowgirl.
Yeah.
Such a great title. Tell me a little bit about like what happened, and then I'd love to talk to you about like some of the lessons that you've learned from the whole thing.
For sure. What happened to get the titanium moniker? That part?
Yeah.
So I think some of I call it in my book, serendipitous experiences. I had been to a clinic, I think in November, and then it was back in the days when it rained, and it had rained and rained and rained. Well, at least in California, we're grateful when we get rain. And it just happened to be this beautiful, sunny January day. And it was about 4:30. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to sneak a little ride on my horse, Wishado, who I call Wish, because I hadn't ridden her since November because it had been wet. And I thought, we'll just see what happens. I didn't have any plan. I've got maybe, an hour and a half till sunset. And everything was going great. And she was just really smooth and easy. And we were just in the zone. And we have a trail around our property we call the superhighway. And we were partway through the superhighway. It's probably about, I don't know, 2 miles, maybe 1.5 miles. We were on the meadow side, and there was something that had been set up in the meadow that she was unfamiliar with. And everything, the armchair quarterback thing, Molly.
Oh, yeah.
Everything in it was like, danger, danger. Her mind left the building. And we've talked about having your mind a lot in the clinic with Charlie Snell. It's really the fundamental aspect of his horsemanship. And her mind was just like, whoop, gone. And I was like, okay, come on. We have to go. It's like TikTok human. It's getting dark. And I knew that I really didn't have her mind back, but I was thinking I have to get home. It's getting dark. And Wish is usually reluctant to give you a lot of speed, but she was like, I've got some speed, I have some forward energy. And I was like, good, let's go. Clue number 2. and off we went. And I was like, dang, this is great. I mean, this horse is really moving out, and this is unusual. Clue number 3. And the serendipitous part of it was as we were coming up the final stretch, and I could still see it like traumatic rewind in the corner of my left eye, a rabbit just came out of both of our blind spots and kind of went right for her front hooves. And she was like, whoop, and went up in the air and sideways simultaneously. And while it's happening, I'm looking, and there's this big brushy patch of manzanita and small scrub oaks. And I think in my mind, well, I don't want to end up in that tangled up whatever. So I'll just do like, there used to be this cowboy, I can't remember his name, but he was famous for his like beautiful dismount. Mm-hmm. Hollywood Henderson or something like that. And I'm like, I'll just like do that. I'll just do this nice dismount. And the last I remember is being up in the air, not doing a nice dismount, and just hitting the ground, which felt like cement, and knocking the wind out of me. And I thought, this is bad. I tried to stand up, and the pain was just blinding. And I have a really high pain tolerance. So I say I'm either have a really high pain tolerance or I'm not very smart. But I was like, oh, I should probably try and get home. So I started crawling, which was really, really not a good idea, because fast forward to when I got to the hospital and they said, your back is broken. My lumbar L1, the big boy in your back, I heard this big, and I have my master's degree in biology. So you think I'd be smart enough to know when you hear a loud sound, that's not good. It was like literally like those casinos in Las Vegas that they implode. Like it was a burst fracture. So it just disintegrated.
Wow.
And then my spinal cord, the vertebrae was impinging on my spinal cord. So crawling was a super bad idea.
Right.
So that's what happened. And then I think for me, as in my horsemanship journey, I had lots of time to armchair quarterback that one, but like I told you, it was clear as day. And horses get a bad reputation if they've been involved in a wreck. And so I always felt really bad. I had some angst in writing about it, but a friend of mine named Ernie, who I also wrote about, who's a cowboy, he was like, Michelle, there's a lot of women your age who love horses, who've had a lot of different experiences. And the fact that you tell the truth about, you're like, mea culpa, it is not this horse's fault. He says, I think that's really important. So I take it all. It wasn't her. I mean, it wasn't her at all. She gave me every single sign. And I know some people have wrecks, Molly, where they're like, where'd that come from?
Right.
And I think you and I know, as we learn more, you wonder, was it really not there? But I know
Right.
some things do happen, like friends
Sure.
had horses attacked by yellow jackets,
Right.
but the operator error things, I think the more you learn, the more you realize that the signs are there, and hers
Right.
were
And
right
really,
there.
yeah. And really, I know for me, with what happened for me, which, someday I'll tell that story too. I don't want to
Yeah,
do it here because I don't want to take all the time, but it's very similar to what happened for you. I didn't have my horse's mind. I wasn't fully present. I had a different agenda.
yeah,
Um, and I think for me, one of the things that it caused me to appreciate even more than I did before, is the signs that they give. Like you said, flag number one,
right,
and
right.
they, like you said, with your mare, she gave you everything, all these different signs, and it's a matter of us paying attention to them. And now I listen in such a different way.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Yeah,
So the book, I love books.
me too.
And your love of books comes through in
Aw.
this one. It's so easy to read, and in a wonderful way. Like you're a wonderful storyteller. And I actually, I don't know, are you familiar with Brene Brown?
Oh yeah,
Okay. So
yeah.
there's an artist, Brandy Carlisle. I don't know if you know her. She's a musician. She
Oh
lives up
yeah,
in
yeah,
the
yeah,
Seattle area. Yeah.
yeah.
So she just wrote her memoir not too long ago, and it's called Broken Horses.
Oh my
I
gosh.
haven't read it yet, but Brene, wrote a review, and there's a little piece on the back, and it really spoke to me about how I felt about your storytelling.
Uh-huh.
So I'm just gonna read the quote
Oh,
really
please
quick.
do. And then we'll just pretend Brene's talking about me.
Yes, exactly. We'll just put your name
Cross that out.
in where it says Brandy. I'll just
Thank
use a
you.
little marker
Do that.
and so she says, a good storyteller tells you about their life. A great storyteller guides you so deep into their heart that you actually end up seeing yourself.
Aw, that's
And
beautiful.
I just, I feel like, I mean, you do such a wonderful job of telling what happened for you, the lessons that, you were gifted with, the struggles, and I felt like I was there with you. I feel like I could go and pick out each of your horses,
Yeah.
and I feel like I know your husband, like, and I feel like that's great storytelling, but I got so much reflected back. Like I kept thinking about, some of the lessons that I learned, and not just because I also got injured. I mean, just living life. And so if I just recommend people check out this book, it's just such a pleasure.
Thank
It was
you.
such a pleasure to read. But one of the things I loved in it is that each of your chapters, is there's a different lesson in each one, and there's a different image in each one. Like, the rabbit is in one, the sunspot that your little dog finds,
Yeah.
your hands and your mom's hands. Like, I was really curious about how that decision came to be. Like, did you just write that way, or how did that happen?
Well, I think the big umbrella here is I'm an only child and I spent a lot of time reading, and I'm a thinker. I'm also a talker, but I'm a thinker. So I think weird thoughts all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And like something can come to me from, I could probably walk down the hill to the barn and find like a gum wrapper and something would come to me. So first of all, I have really random mind. Second of all, I didn't set out to write a book. When I had my accident, I would describe myself, and probably a lot of horse people and horsewomen, as a really uber independent. I have a chapter called Can Do Girls, which is like, get out of my way, I can do it.
Yep.
And it's the country thing. It's like, I'll fix it, I'll do it, I'll make it work. So I had no intention of writing a book, but I was just like blown apart physically and emotionally because I was incapacitated for the most part and super fragile. And I wasn't used to being that way. I'm used to being the person, like I say, like, we're talking about where does love of horses come from? For me, I'm like, I'm a jump off and ask how deep it is later person by nature. I've tried to really like rein that in.
Mm-hmm.
But so it was devastating for me, this lack of independence and who am I now and can I ever ride again? And so all these thoughts, as you experienced yourself, were churning around in my head. And I'm loving books and being a very, very verbal person. So I'm like, where do I like splat all these words out? My mom's like, you should journal. And I'm like, screw journaling. I don't want anybody to, like, if I die and they read these journals and they're like, what a terrible person, because why write something if you don't write your true thoughts? And then if you write your true thoughts, you're like, well, I don't want anyone to read those. So
Right.
I just wrote my true thoughts and shared them with the whole world. But little things would come to me, and then I would just go to the computer and download it. And then eventually I had it seemed like, oh, guess what? There's a journey here.
Right.
And I just dumped them all out. And at some point I thought, okay, I'm not the only person who has run into the wall of life before. Maybe there's something here. So towards your question, it's like at some point when I was kind of on out of the valley of my journey, I thought, okay, maybe there's hope and encouragement here that I could share with someone else. So I laid them all out, and I never self-edited myself because I wasn't intending it for publication.
Right.
But then they all kind of, you can tell as you read it, the progression of timing. Like one was called 5 Months in a Frog. So that was 5 months post accident. And then when I laid them all out, I was like, oh, look, it's like a little path.
That's really cool.
So that's why.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So part of it is just the way you see the world. Like you said, you'll see a gum wrapper and be like, oh, there's meaning here.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is that's a really neat way to go about life, is trying to look for the little meaning in things that you wouldn't ordinarily think there is any.
Yeah.
Which brings me to one of the things, I mean, there's a lot of pieces of this, like I mentioned, images that really stood out for me, but one of them is the Black Sharpie line.
Oh yeah.
And first of all, like what is that for folks that haven't read the book yet? Like, what is the Black Sharpie line? And then I'll ask you one more question about it.
I'm trying to look on my desk if I even have a marker. Okay, so this one is not black, it's green.
Yeah.
But everybody knows the Black Sharpie.
Right.
And it says permanent marker. So if you had like little kids, you're like, you do not want them getting hold of a Black Sharpie because they'll draw on their faces or draw on their wall. Black Sharpies, I mean, once you draw it a line, it never goes away.
Right.
So I don't know how that visual came to me, but it's the indelible line that if you asked all of us, we would all easily be able to say this, that. When I lost, for me, my father is the first Black Sharpie line, losing him that I can remember. And then losing beloved grandparents and losing a beloved pet, or having a traumatic accident or a tragic loss or a divorce or something like that. You lay them out and we've all got them. So what I said in the book was when I had the accident, I crawled up the hill. I got in the four-wheeler. I got my horse put away because I'm literally not, you're a horse person. You're like, take care of my horse. I crawled into the house. My son was like, what is going on? And when my husband came home, I was like, oh, I'm probably not going to feel very good tomorrow. And he's like, we need an ambulance. So then I was in emergency for a very long time. But when they came running in saying her back's broken, put her back on the board, put your legs down, I could feel literally like somebody just like replaced all the blood in my body with like antifreeze. It was just that everyone's felt that draining feeling where all the body heat leaves you and you're just filled with ice water. Black Sharpie.
Okay. And it's that line, like you mentioned, I think you mentioned in the book, that line of, it's a distinct thing where you can say, this was my life before.
Right.
And then the line, after. And then, yeah. And I think it's such a powerful image too, because you'd mentioned that, you could try to erase it, right?
Yeah.
We can try to pretend it's not there, but it's in permanent ink.
Yeah.
And it really, like, that analogy really got me thinking about how often when things like that happen in our lives, we either do spend all this energy trying to erase it or trying to add, something to make it look more the way we want it to look,
Or ignore
instead
it.
of getting to that place where we accept it
Yeah,
and start to learn the lessons that it brings.
absolutely.
And yeah, which is your book. So what would you say, like, what are a couple of the lessons that time in your life brought to you?
I think you teed it up perfectly, Molly, because we've all had trauma, spiritual, emotional, physical, mental. We've all had trauma, some of it all together, some of it at different times. But
Right.
I think one of the great lessons of life is, do you trail that trauma around with you, like clanking cans that people put on just married cars? Do you like try and cut the cords loose? What do you do with it so that it doesn't preclude you from living as fully as possible as you can in the human condition, which for me is, like Charlie says, being mentally alert, relaxed and present.
Yes.
We're trying to do that for our horses, so we have some work to do for ourselves, obviously, because you can't fake it with horses.
Right.
So for me, this was obviously life altering, and I think give yourself time. Like when my neurosurgeon told me, in a year you'll be, and he said 100%, which I call baloney on that. But I
Right.
was like, I got that at 6 months, and I'm like ridiculous, push myself and cut myself no slack. But 6 months came and I was like, not even. So I think if you haven't experienced debilitating physical trauma, that it'd be nice if people said, oh, I've been there, different kinds of trauma or different kinds of physical ailments. But recovery, it's like you have to define, what does recovery mean? Does it mean I want to be exactly who I was before? Because at some point I had to reconcile I'm never going to be that same person again, because I'm like fused together.
Right.
Does it mean that I'm more resilient, like you said, that I'm not trying to erase it or sugarcoat it? I think it's that was really my reasons for deciding this as a book, was to help. Someone asked me, what's your idea of success? As my husband, and because he's like, Brene Brown's probably not going to be writing me a review. He didn't say that, but and I'm like, okay, what's my idea of success? It's obviously not to be famous, but it was to help one horse get a better deal, which is through horsemanship. To help encourage at least one person that you're not alone in trauma, and that it make my publisher enough, Tom Moats, enough money that he doesn't regret publishing me. But I think it's to know that it takes the time it takes, and that might be a Pirelli quote. That takes the time it takes, and that you're going to have days where you're like, I'm on fire, I can do this, and then you're probably going to feel like crap the next day because you pushed yourself too hard. There are going to be days where you're like, this is pointless, and you just want to like hide in a hole. And I had a chapter about the 2,000-pound boulder, and that's what I think traumatic accidents feel like. Like here's your life, and you're just riding along. Somebody drops this 2,000-pound boulder on the road. And I think for me, if you visualize it, like there's no way you or I are going to be able to move that boulder unless we have like a heavy equipment. But if it's 2,000 pounds of rocks, I think the task before us is, do I want to get from here to there, wherever there is, and then move a rock a day? Some days you might not be able to move a rock. Some days you move 5, but, and I had written about find the small joys, store those up, whether it's Cheetos or chocolate or like the Danes, bacon and cake.
Yes.
good friends, coffee, crying in your dog's fur, whatever it is, those all add up.
I love
Someday
that
you will
one.
get there. And if you're lucky, you will realize that goodness and joy can come out of utter, you know what, shows.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I love that that message of, collecting the small joys. And actually, do you mind if I read a little piece of?
No,
Okay,
absolutely not.
because it's funny that you mentioned the bacon and the Danes, because I've got writing all over this book, but
Do you
it's
like bacon?
oh yes, absolutely.
There you
But
go.
it was funny that you mentioned it because it was the part of the book that I
Oh, good.
highlighted.
Okay.
So you say here, the Danes have found, the folks living in Denmark, the Danes have found a way of life where they create small moments of joy in their dark, dark winters. I was in my own dark winter, and I was finding too, just like the Danes, that these small comforts were helping me build a life raft when recovery seemed too far away to grasp. I've learned the hard way not to underestimate the cumulative effects, or excuse me, the cumulative effect of small joys. Small joys may seem too small to make a big difference, but I found that those small joys were some of my greatest moments of solace when I felt almost empty.
Yeah.
I love that so much in so many ways. Like the Danes, people that live in a place that is dark for like ever, right?
Right.
Kind of, I feel like that sometimes living up here in the Northwest,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
We've got
That's what's
long
sad. That's where
winters.
sad comes from.
Yeah,
That
right.
seasonal, yeah.
Yeah. And that it's also in that culture where they realize that, hey, if we're going to survive this, we've got to find those small joys. And what a wonderful way to look at it. And I loved the part where you were looking at your little dog in the sunspot, and how your little was that Scout?
That was Scout, yeah.
Okay, so little Scout was finding the small joys, just one little sliver of sun, that he found, and that, so many parts of nature, animals remind us of those little things, because we can get so caught up in the woe is me, which is part of it. Like we're gonna, when we have traumatic things happen, we're gonna have times where we feel like crap and we feel sorry for ourselves, but to step out of it and look for those little things. And I thought of it the other day, when I was revisiting your book, and I just thought, what a cool thing to think about, because a lot of us like to collect things. And if you think about that, that's what you're collecting, like those little
Oh,
moments.
I like that.
Yeah, I do too. I just was like, wow, it just kind of sets me out on the day to have a different outlook. Like, oh, I found another one kind of a way.
Well,
So
it can be like there are people who believe that feathers are messages, so it can be a feather, it can be a beautiful little rock, it can be, a quarter, it can be, oh, look at that little bird. I think we're in a time period of humanity where we're so barraged by so much stuff that, I'll tell you another thing. Don't go searching out whatever your problem is on the internet.
yes.
Do not do that.
Yeah.
Because I was like, what do you mean all my screws are going to pop out? And I was like, nope. And so here's probably my biggest lesson was, I'm a very optimistic person. I call myself a pragmatic optimist or a realistic optimist, but I'm very much like, it'll all be fine. And I suffered with anxiety where when I was more mobile and I could be busy during the day, because we all know that being busy can take your mind off of lots of things.
Mm-hmm.
But at nighttime, as soon as I would lay down, it was like an elephant was just hovering over me. And it would be like, I'm going to sit on your chest now. And I couldn't sleep and I'd panic. And so I was praying every night. Like sometimes my prayers are just, God help me. And what came to me finally one day, I think I was like full on hyperventilating and thinking I'm never going to get better. This is terrible. And what came to me is, today you're good. And that's a mantra of so many programs, 12-step programs, all kinds of philosophical and in horsemanship. And I actually have a phrase that I use all the time on social media, like horsemanship / life. And my friend Mark Rashid, who's an amazing horseman, he always says life is an opportunity to practice your horsemanship. And every time I'm in Safeway and there's 20 people lined in front of me, I think of Mark and I'm like, namaste, be patient. Because I'm like, ooh. And I'm like, Michelle, you're a terrible horseman because you can't even be patient and Safeway, but horsemanship in life. And today I'm good. Like even says in the Bible, like you have all that you need to be concerned about today. And,
Right.
yeah, those of us who've had accidents, then you focus on, I've had a terrible accident. I don't want that to happen again. But we all drive cars. We could get hit by a meteor. Things can and do happen all the time. But I think reframing it to today I'm good. And grammatically, that should be today I'm well. I know that. I don't know what God's deal with grammar is, but that's kind of become a little mantra of mine is when I feel like I'm kind of spiraling out, which is today I'm good. And that's where the little storing up the joys. And there's always somebody else who could use that you think you're glum, but they're glummer, So
Yeah.
I liked who I was physically better before, but I like who I've become lessons wise because I realize there's like almost 8 billion of us and we're all on a journey and we all need kindness. So to ourselves too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so great. It's such a good reminder. And I love that, what you shared from Mark Rashid that, life is an opportunity to practice horsemanship.
Yeah.
Did I get
All
that
the
right?
time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think that, when you have this, I'm going to jokingly, tongue in cheek, call it an affliction of the horse addiction. You see it everywhere, right? Like, the Safeway line, observing people and seeing if you can pick up on tension and what would happen if I move over here and like what if I back off a little bit or what if I match them. It's interesting how it mirrors so many different things. And I love so much what you've shared, from what you've learned from the journey that you went through that you didn't choose to go through, but you ended up there. And I know for me, it was really helpful for me to read your story. So you can tick that off as far as your definition of success. Yeah. And I'm sure I know everyone that's read it. And like I said in the beginning, even if it isn't an accident that you've gone through, it really is this, I don't want to say guide, but it's this example of navigating a really tough journey. So if, like you mentioned, we all have trauma, like you can't get through life without it, unless you weren't lucky enough to survive very long.
Right.
But if you've been in this life for a while, you're going to have trauma. And this book is just such a great example of how to navigate that. And,
Thank you.
Asking for help.
Yeah.
That was a huge one, right? It's so incredibly difficult to do. Like you said, we're independent people that get into horses, men and women, but I happen to know a lot more women, and we're tough people, and I think we all pride ourselves on being independent, and it's asking for help and not being physically able to do what we were able to do a day ago or 6 months ago. It's a really, really interesting journey, but there are so many gifts in it, and you've shared so many in these books, or in this book. So do you have any, this has been wonderful, by the way. I've loved hearing from you. Like I said at the beginning, this is the first time we've actually been able to
Yeah,
talk.
we get to know each other.
Yeah, which is really cool. If there's someone that is listening to this and they're struggling right now, is there anything? I mean, you've kind of already given us a bunch of different piece of advice. How about for like regaining confidence
Oh
riding?
gosh.
Is there anything that you can share from your journey that could possibly help someone?
I hope so, Molly. And it's really a work in progress for me. And Charlie, on kind of the far end of it, was instrumental for me also. So I was lucky I could even walk again. I mean, I was literally like put back together titanium with titanium. Um, so I had to address the question, and I know there are people out there that are like, you're insane, woman, and we do not condone your decision, but I wanted to ride again. Now, mind you, it's much different, and how I approach it is different, but I wanted to ride again. So first I talked to my husband and I said, can you support this? Because this, is kind of a big deal for our family, not just me. And he said yes, because it's going to make me cry, because he says, I know it's such a part of you. It's one of the things that helps me feel like me.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, I need to do this differently. Like, gone are the days of a ball cap and no helmet. Wear a helmet, people.
Yeah.
Which in a Western style of writing, it's very not the thing, So
Oh, there's so much wrapped up in that. Yeah.
that's
That
a
I might ask
whole
you more about, but
that's a
yeah.
whole other discussion, which I find fascinating.
Right.
But there was a girl down the hall from me in ICU, a young girl who had a head injury, and she had a net around her bed because she kept trying to get out of it and she would fall down. So I don't like putting it on, but I'm trying to incorporate it's just as much as putting on your seatbelt. So I said, are you okay if I want to ride again? So it was like, or you can wear, so I'm wearing a helmet. And I started off wearing like I have friends who are in eventing and who wear body protectors all the time. So I researched vests and I was like, okay, I'm getting that. And my old horse Simba, he also passed away recently. He's on the cover of the book. He literally said, I could hear him say, ride me, when I was ready. And mind you, I've got my helmet on, my vest, I've got my husband, I've got my dog, and it's like this real dog and pony show, like getting this woman back in the saddle. And the minute I threw my leg over, it was like these two like mirror images of me that had been split, the Black Sharpie line split apart. I could feel them come a little bit closer. The next time I rode, I could feel them come a little bit closer. We learned to surf a while back. I was never good at it, but I liked it. So I tried that again and I feel it come a little bit closer. I love to ski. So we ski, but I ski on easy slopes, looking behind me, like for people who want to take me out. Every time I do something that makes me feel like me, like the things that I feel are integral to me, I feel like those parts come together. So I'd say for people who have experienced trauma, find the things that make you feel like you. Like I have a dear friend who does not think she can ride because of her back situation. But when she comes to visit, we call it playing horses. So we play horses and brush them and groom them like we used to in high school. Right. And she smells them, so foster a horse or, get out and walk. If you like to run, see how fast you can walk. I mean, find some version of the things that make you feel like you and do it. Because to me, that's what puts you back together. Not the same, but it puts the you together.
Yeah, that's so good. And I totally agree with that. Like in my own journey to ride again and rebuild that confidence, because one of the things that I found is that when your body breaks, your brain it takes on a really important role, right? Your brain wants to keep you alive. So it will do all sorts of things to try to keep you from redoing what you did before. And part of that is the fear. And so I think for myself, understanding that first and really respecting that, okay, got it, brain. Thank you. I know what your job is here to keep me alive. I know you're trying to send me all these fear messages. And finding, like you said, versions of what you did before. So for me, for a while, it was just hanging out with them on the other side of the fence, because I knew if I got knocked, I'd be in big trouble.
Right.
So, or, looking out the window, or, after a while, standing at the mounting block, and I think that one of the things that people can sometimes get into trouble with is feeling like it's all or nothing. I'm either going to do what I did before. Your dog has some things to say. It's, either that you're going to do exactly what you were doing before, or it's, or nothing. And I feel like, I don't know if getting rid of that, I don't know what the right word is, but accepting that it's going to be a process, and that those little things, standing at the mounting block, going and playing horse with your friend, those are the things, those are the little bits that make it all worthwhile. It's not necessarily the riding down the trail. So I think that's so important, to find those little
parts. You just gave me goosebumps, Molly, because I have a thing that I have a Facebook page and an Instagram that I started for my book to just kind of be an ongoing source of conversation and encouragement and vulnerability. That was for me what's under, and I think women tend to be super hard on themselves. And when you discover horsemanship and you realize, oh my gosh, there's all this stuff to learn, then I think it's the rare ones of us aren't hard on ourselves. And then whatever confidence you have, like in your other life, sometimes falls away because you're like, oh, I don't want to make mistakes, or I want to do too much or not do too little. And you get all, discombobulated in your head.
Right.
But I think to be able, even if we could take the time to say, you know what, and this is something Charlie said in our clinic, and Mark says as well, who cares if you make a mistake?
Right.
And if you find the right venue, the right friends, the right partners, the right mentors who are like, and Brene Brown touts it, it's like vulnerability is your greatest strength, man. And that's when my book was out in the world, I was like, holy crap. Now I feel like, why did I say this or that? But I'm like, if we can't be real, then don't even bother for me.
Absolutely.
What is the point? If we're going to encourage each other, support each other, learn without the onus of, oh my gosh, don't make the wrong answer. And I was an instructor of biology at our community college for 6 years. And I always told my students, I don't care what you ask, just ask it.
Right.
Advocate for yourself, find what you need, whether that is a quiet space or kinder friends or a better mentor.
Right.
Advocate for yourself by being able to be true to yourself, kind, and be all right to go, you know what, I can't do that right now.
Right.
Or I can, and help me do that.
Right. And it's contagious, when people start to share their real truth and make mistakes and share the mistakes. It's contagious. You start to go, well, if she can do it, I can do it too. I can be brave, and I can step out there and do it too. So, and it's similar to the first person on the dance floor. There's some phrase that describes that, and I can't remember what it is.
I'll tell you what phrase describes it. It's my marriage. I'm the first person on the dance floor. My husband's the last person, but he's an awesome dancer, and that's actually how we started dating. So
that is great.
Come on. And he's like, no, really?
That is great.
Funny. So find the person who's either the first person or the last person and make them your friend.
That's great. That's great because we need each other, right?
Absolutely.
There's aspects of that.
Yeah.
And that was the other thing is as I'm listening to you share, and in your book, you have such a beautiful chapter in there about your girlfriends,
Oh yeah.
your
Soul
horse
sisters.
girlfriend.
Yeah.
Yeah. And finding that support,
Yeah.
whether even if it's just one person and finding the right person for like I mentioned at the beginning, because I broke my back, I sought out Charlie. And I there were other people in my life that I've learned from, for years with horsemanship, but there's something about him, and I knew that I needed to go and find him, and I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't injured myself. So finding those people that will support you. And one other little quick thing about Charlie, I mean, it is what brings us together, so it makes sense why his name's coming up. But I remember when I first talked to him about that I hadn't ridden yet, and that I knew what I needed to do to rebuild my confidence, but that I wasn't going to be riding for a while. And he shared a story that I'm sure he shared with you. I won't tell the story, but basically where he got into a really bad wreck himself, had to rebuild his own confidence. And I just knew then, I was like, that's it. I knew I wanted to learn from you, but now I know that not only do I want to learn from you, but I know that you're going to be somebody that can support me through this. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think also to recognize that it's a dynamic process, that some days you'll feel maybe close to bulletproof again, and other days you'll be like, I just need a weighted blanket,
Yes.
But I started off with the really hardcore and hard shell body protector vest that I did a lot of research for. But when I would put it on, like all I could feel was it. And it was at a clinic that I hosted here with Charlie as as the guy, and he started talking about trauma, and I just like my eyes welled up, and I thought, where'd that, how trauma is. I was like, I don't have trauma, and I apparently did, and we started talking, and Charlie asked me a few questions, and I said, I think every time I put on this vest, I feel broken. And he goes, well, you know what? Maybe it's time for a different one. He goes, why don't you look at one like Bull Riders? And I was thinking, there you go. I'm like, now I'm going to be like channeling Bull Rider vibes. But I did. I looked and I found a different one because I still feel like I need to wear one. But this one is, it's still protective, but it's light enough I can wear a jacket over it. But just keep chipping away, chip away at it, and realize it's a dynamic process. The confidence, and looking at that now, because my horse Satin, who was my comeback horse, is like Murphy. She should be called Murphy's Law. She had some lameness issues, and then she was bitten by a rattlesnake. And so now I'm dealing with lameness on lameness. So I'm actually kind of looking at other horses, and I'm thinking, this next horse will also be a different me, because Satin and I went through a lot together,
right?
Getting back to riding. So just cut yourself some slack.
Yes. Yes. So many good things. I think we could keep talking for quite a while, but I think this is a great place to wrap up and just tell you, I'm so grateful that you shared your story. And who's this? This is the loudmouth.
This is the loudmouth, Rufus. Now he's acting like he's all civilized.
Oh, he's so cute. So those of you listening, you can't see Rufus, but he's super cute little terrier. So just, I think it does, like you mentioned, vulnerability. It takes bravery. They go hand in hand, bravery and vulnerability. And for you to share your story definitely helped me. And I hope for folks that are listening that even just this conversation has helped, but I would just recommend checking out this book, and you can find it on Amazon. I got it on Amazon. You're official when you can be found on Amazon.
And it's also in Audible. My son Jake actually produced it because he's mounted that way. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you can listen to it or read it. And Michelle, thank you so much for
Molly, such an
joining.
honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that we've met through somebody that we admire, like
I know, me
you and
too. And
Charlie,
yeah,
and
yeah,
hope
and
to be
then
friends.
yeah, absolutely. And somewhere down the line we'll be able to meet in person.
Oh,
I
for
know it.
sure.
Yeah,
For
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Yeah, thank you. I hope this conversation brought some new ideas your way and some inspiration for your own journey. I know it did for me. I also wanted to mention that Michelle and I often mentioned the name Charlie, Charlie Snell. That's who brought Michelle and I together. And if you haven't listened to the interview that I did a few months ago with Charlie, it's a pretty special one. So I'll link to it in the show notes. In the US today, it's a special holiday. We're celebrating Thanksgiving. So I wanted to say a happy Thanksgiving to those of you celebrating it. And whether you're celebrating the day or not, I hope today you find moments of joy to add to your collection. And I just want to say how grateful I am that you're here. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.